Hi, everybody, and welcome to our next CEO Leadership Lesson Series, an If I Knew Then conversation with my friend and someone I've learned a whole lot from, the co-founder and CEO of ZipRecruiter, Ian Siegel. Hey, Ian.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
I've really been looking for this conversation. Ian and I get to chat a lot more than we do a lot of the guests we've had on here. But I feel like I've never had an opportunity to really pick your brain for an hour straight and all the amazing things that have happened to you over the last decade since we started spending more time together. And so this is going to be an incredibly awesome session. Ian's an absolutely amazing business leader. He's also a new author, a best-selling author of Get Hired Now, the book you see behind him. And so I definitely encourage you all to check out his book. It's going to be an incredible set of lessons on how to really find the job of your dreams. And so we'll go into that more in just a bit. I think pretty much everyone here, Ian, is going to know and already probably be a user either on the business side or job seeker side of ZipRecruiter. But in your own words, how do you describe the business today?
Well, ZipRecruiter is a full job marketplace, meaning we provide solutions for both employers and for job seekers. For employers, we're known for letting you push one button and send a job to over 100 websites with one submission. And then for job seekers, we do the opposite, which is where we pull all the jobs from across the country into one easy to search database. So we really provide efficiency to both sides of the marketplace, and from our very early beginnings till now, we have grown a considerable amount, and we are delighted with where we are at.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. This again is our show in partnership with Comparably and Entrepreneur Media. Comparably is an employee review platform, and we help companies with their employer brand and recruitment marketing. And so it's just amazing to see, all the incredible things that ZipRecruiter has done again over the last, decade almost now. Talk to us all. Like, how did you found the business? Like, what was that founding story? I know it, pretty intimately well, but it's just such an incredible journey that you've all been on.
Well, I spent my entire career working for early stage internet startups. And prior to ZipRecruiter, I was always an employee or an executive of those companies. And when I was managing a team or teams, what was true at those companies is they were too small to have an HR department that could do my recruiting for me. So I was the one who was personally taking a job and putting the same job on multiple different websites. And then every one of those sites had a different mechanism by which you had to collect the candidates that had applied. So I did what everybody did back then, which is I would go and I would print all the resumes of all the applicants and just make stacks. And that was how I combined all the applicants for a single job into one reviewable list. It was just so crazy. And I literally had the idea for ZipRecruiter for over a decade before I built it. And I just couldn't believe that I was spending so much time on recruiting. So I pulled 3 friends together and I convinced them that we needed to build this. And we put that magic button together where you could just push that button and send the job to every job site on the internet, effectively turning the web into one giant job board. And the day we launched, we were profitable. I mean, it was literally like the customers had been beating at the gates like it was Black Friday and we had something on sale, because they just came in so fast that we really were taken off guard. It's that rare example of immediate product market fit. And it was a great example also of trusting your gut, because all I did as research for building this business was build the service that I wished existed that I could have been using all the way through my career. And it turns out we really resonated with the market broadly because we just had such immediate traction.
You gave me probably one of the best piece of product advice I ever got. And I share it with my team and all these different companies I either invest or advise all the time. And I remember you told me, years ago, the mistake that everybody makes when they build stuff is that they build too many things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't know why something either does work or it doesn't work. And your goal should be able to put the simplest thing in front of a customer. And then if it doesn't work, you know exactly why. And if it doesn't, you know as well too. Like, can you just expand on that and how has that helped shape?
I preach this internally and I tell every aspiring entrepreneur this. So this is like the Ian #1 piece of advice and wisdom that I try to dispense, which is fundamentally every business only sells one thing. And when I say to you right now, I say like, hey, what does Google do? immediately you think they're a search engine. And if I say to you, what does Amazon do? You say, oh, they're a big shopping site. But Google is so much more than a search engine at this point. They're the biggest email company, they're the biggest mapping company. And what is Amazon? I mean, they're the backbone of the entire internet when you look at their AWS business. But that's not what they're famous for. That's not what people think of first. And so I believe every business fundamentally only sells one thing, and you gotta know your one thing. You gotta know what it is that makes you special, because that's the thing you wanna be the best at. That's the thing you wanna make the easiest to do on your service. And once you know that one thing, once you figure it out, then your job is to tell as many people as possible about that one thing. Your job is not to create another thing. And so many of us by default think like, oh, I built something that people like once. So if I want to grow my business, what I really got to do is I got to build something else that people like. And really, that just tends to not be the truth. So the best way to grow a business after you have found product market fit is to invest heavily in all the different ways you can become ubiquitous, in all the different ways you can tell and touch as many people out there as possible about the thing that you have built.
It's helped me so much over the last many years. And I try to remind myself of it because I definitely fall in the trap of, oh, there's this next thing that I want to do. There's this next thing that I want to try. But one of the things
I just want to add on to that really quick. Like, I am so serious about this that when we build, we talk about white space in design a lot, which is like the effort to put as little on the screen as possible. And I talk about white space inside of products. And like, once you know your one thing, every additional feature you add, every button, every link, it's potentially just cognitive load that's going to confuse your users. It's going to create problems for you. And so literally every year at ZipRecruiter, we turn features off. And I have joked about, but only half kiddingly, like every year, I want to do a press release at the end of the year that says, once again, ZipRecruiter gets even easier to use. Here are all the features we shut off this year. Instead of lauding the new features that we built, just talking about stuff that wasn't getting enough usage, so we turned it off. That's how committed I am to the one thing philosophy.
That's pretty cool. I could imagine like internally at the company, once a year, you have a product funeral.
Yeah,
for all the features that passed on.
That's a good idea. We should do a product funeral. I love that idea.
Yeah. One of the things that was always so exceptional to me about your story, and it was similar. So we just recently had Eric Yuan, the founder and CEO of Zoom on, and he didn't start Zoom until his 40s. And he was a super successful engineering lead at Cisco and had come from, WebEx. You had this really successful career as a head of product, as an executive for many years. That's not an easy path to leave, with families and kids and mortgages. And a lot of people have the same aspirations that you do, but they never take that leap. What was different about it for you? Why did you feel like, hey, even though I'm having all the success as an executive, that I want to kind of chart my own path here a little bit later than maybe some other people do?
Wow. Let me tell you, I had spent almost 20 years as an executive at internet startups, many of which had tremendous outcomes. And I'm talking about IPOs, I'm talking about sales, I'm talking about major mergers. And so theoretically, I was as credentialed as someone could be to start a startup. And when I went and started a startup, everyone asked me, are you sure you're qualified? What makes you think this is going to work? I mean, I've described becoming an entrepreneur before you've made your first dollar as telling people you're an artist. Because they're like, oh, really? Who's bought your paintings? How many paintings have you sold? It's effectively the same feeling you get, where it's just doubt. That's all you get confronted with. And so it is a lot to take. And what people have asked me over and over again is how did you know it was going to work? What made you so sure? What gave you that conviction? And I say all the time, it's not conviction. Conviction has nothing to do with it. It's courage. That's really all entrepreneurship is, because it's a willingness to throw yourself into the unknown. And let's be very clear. A lot of people become entrepreneurs because they have an elite skill. Let's say you're a chef and you love to cook and you say, I'm going to open a restaurant because I love to cook and I'm such a good chef. But the reality is, once you open that restaurant, cooking is going to be the smallest part of your job. The thing you are the best at, you're going to do 5% of the time, and 95% of your life is doing a bunch of stuff that you've never trained in, that you're not feeling confident in, and you're going to have to make a lot of decisions really fast. So whether you're picking a restaurant space, designing the decor, hiring people, designing a menu. Like, these are things that a chef doesn't normally have to do. That's what being an entrepreneur is like. I remember the first year of our business, I spent so much time on problems like leases, getting insurance for the employees, hiring lawyers to review our hiring contract, like things I just never, like someone had always taken care of that stuff for me. So it is a lot of discomfort, but it is the greatest life you can lead. And if I could go back and talk to myself, like, I was getting hired over and over again as like a gunfighter to come clean up the towns of founder CEOs who had built sites that had reached a certain level and then started to level off. And so I was the guy they brought in to re-accelerate businesses. And if I was good enough to sort of fix broken businesses, like, why was I not having the courage to invest in myself and launch a startup sooner? So I tell everyone, like, you should definitely try entrepreneurship. It's going to be the hardest, most uncomfortable thing you ever did. But if you can break through, it's the greatest life you can possibly lead.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It may seem like a simple answer, but I think we'll talk a lot today about this concept of product market fit. Like, how does somebody know when they actually have product market fit? Like, if you were looking at an outside business, that you invested in or you were on the board of, how would you know when they have product market fit and they have something that they should lean into versus something that they should go to the next thing and keep trying?
I have an overly simplistic answer to this question, and I really have two answers to this question. But here's what I tell people who ask me for advice about their startups: 1 million anything. If you don't have 1 million something, don't go to VCs. Don't try to raise money. You do not have momentum. You have an idea, and it can be 1 million visitors, 1 million registrations, 1 million products sold. $1 million is the best. That's the best proof that you have a real business. 90% of businesses never get to $1 million in revenue. So if you ever get to 1 million, congratulations. You've like really cracked the code on something. That's a tremendous milestone. But 1 million anything. And then the other way that you have product market fit, and it's also a great way to know your one thing, which I talk a lot, like, well, how do you know what your one thing is? Because you think you're building something, but what is it that people really value you for? The only way to find out is have a current customer who loves you, talk to a prospect. Listen to the first sentence out of their mouth. Whatever they describe you as in that first sentence, that's your one thing. Like, you got to use ZipRecruiter because they make it so much easier to hire. You don't have to guess anymore about where to post your job. They just post it everywhere. Oh, great. That's my one thing. Post the job everywhere. That's what we can be famous for. So I strongly encourage you to first talk to customers who are using your service and see if they're all describing it the same way. That's a great way to measure product market fit. Like, if they're all saying the same thing about you, congratulations, you're on the scent. And then 1 million something.
I love that. That's actually really brilliant. Like, I never thought of it that way, which is if you take an existing customer and just ask them to explain to somebody else, not even to you, but to another potential customer, what is that you do that's really unique and special. Like, that's a pretty amazing way to get to your one thing. I haven't heard it described that way before. One of the things that's just so impressive about the business, and so let's just give some quick stats for everybody, right? So, like, what the number of employees at ZipRecruiter today, right? What are all the things that you publicly talk about that, where you share like this size and scope of the business today?
Yeah, well, from our relatively humble beginning at my kitchen table, and we bootstrapped for the first 4.5 years before we raised any outside money. So like, we were really wiring things together in order to keep the business growing. But today, let's see, we have over 900 employees. We have employees in 4 different countries, and we've helped more than 1 million businesses with their hiring, and more than 100 million people look for work. So we're really very proud of where we're at as a business and how well it's done.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this, how you so successfully bootstrapped, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's so much capital out there right now. People are raising massive rounds. Seed rounds are now 10, 15, $20 million sometimes. And, what do you think it was when you started the company that let you and the 3 co-founders so successfully bootstrap that business? Was it a conscious decision, or did you just kind of find it working? You're like, hey, we're going to lean into this and try to avoid raising capital as long as possible?
It was definitely a conscious decision. And it was, I mean, part of it was a byproduct of the career that I'd had prior, where, I mean, there's only two words that VCs fundamentally, if you limited all VCs in every board meeting to only two words, when you're in a VC-backed business, the two words you would hear are more and faster. So like that's all you would hear. And I had this notion of the sensible startup. You know, everyone likes to brag about the fact that the people at their startup work 70 hours a week. You know, I'm a dad, I've got two kids. I always wanted like a startup where people worked really hard and put in a quality 40 hours a week as like a bare minimum high, but like, you know, maybe 50 if you really wanted to push it. But I wanted, you know, when we launched our business and it just took off right at the beginning, we had every option on the table in front of us. There were VCs dropping unsolicited term sheets on my desk for sort of extraordinary valuations, and we really could have taken money. But for me and for the partners I was working with, we were very thoughtful about what is success. And I remember we would sit at a table because there was so much money coming into the business that we could have started to harvest it for our own personal, you know, we could have paid ourselves a lot of money instead of reinvesting in the business. And the question was, what is the right amount of money to pay ourselves? And rather than name a number, we just each went around the table and described what was the life we wanted to lead. And it turned out that for all of us, it wasn't that expensive to live our best lives. And that allowed us to continue to confidently reinvest in the business for growth, while making enough money to live exactly the way we wanted. And people, like, what was mine? Like, I wanted to send my kids to good schools, have dinner with them every night, and fly business class. That was it. That was like my definition of happiness at the time. So I'm a simple guy. And I mean, my partners were similar in the same vein. So we achieved that. And ironically, if you talked to me back then, like, I thought we were going to scale the business till we had like 12 employees and we are going to have a little office on the beach, and I was going to have a dog, and it was going to be really well trained. So I spent like an hour a day training that dog. Like, that was going to be like my plan B, is like to be like, love this dog. And then it just all just kept, we were like the worst startup team for that strategy possible, because the four of us had all been at nothing but hyper growth, successful startups. We were literally the guys you hired to hyper grow your startup. And so it's just like the only thing we knew how to do. And then ultimately here we are today.
So let's talk about that hyper growth. When do you feel, at what stage do you feel like it kicked in, and what's it like being in it, right? When you see something just working, is your instinct to push on the gas and go even faster? How do you manage to make sure it doesn't go off the rails? Like, you had been in situations where you had to restart that hyper growth, but I'm assuming it's pretty different when you create it from the ground up. So what were the big lessons you learned during that time?
I mean, I will tell you, the hardest thing about when a business takes off is that everything is a good idea. Every idea everybody has is good. And the real effect of hyper growth is it is a magnifying glass. And what I mean by that is every problem seems 10 times as large based on the number of people it's impacting. And so when you go from 100 customers to 1,000 customers to 10,000 customers to 100,000, like really fast, suddenly like that small bug that you weren't that worried about at 1,000 customers is a huge deal at 10,000 customers. And it really affects your prioritization, and it really affects how you feel about your product, because I think we're all of us who go into entrepreneurship have a passion for whatever it is we're working on, and we want it to be excellent. And so you start to feel more acutely like when someone is dissatisfied with something that you have built. And so for me, I mean, the real trick, it's gonna sound weird, the real trick to hypergrowth is taking a breath and maintaining perspective. I know that sounds like, that's not like, oh, you need to invest in marketing, you need to hire the right people. All that's true too. But like the fundamental truth is, you know, my favorite saying about startups, this is my favorite saying: first they ignore you, then they mock you, then they try to kill you, then they try to buy you. And so when you're small, everyone ignores you. Like, nobody cares. You wish they would make fun of you. And then they start making fun of you. Like, oh, look at Zip, they're running all these TV ads, they're gonna run out of money, idiots. You know, it's like, we'd hear stuff like that all the time. But the truth is that when they start making fun of you and or they start trying to kill you, what they're really doing is studying you. And when they start studying you, like reporters are writing stories about you, your friends and family are actually using your product, and they're like giving you like, hey, if you just did this one feature, it would be so much better for me. Like, I care now because it's working and other people are talking about it. So you start to get too much advice. And so it's just like, take a breath, maintain perspective. I always talk about the difference between real world time and internet time. Like the other thing about internet, which is different from like traditional box software, is it used to be like software would come out once a quarter, twice a year, once a year. And so like the expectation on the speed to which you'd make either improvements or fix bugs was like months. And now it's like, hey, I told you about the bug yesterday. Why is the bug not fixed today? And so there's just this pressure all the time is what you're going to get. And I've learned to talk to people like, let's just not lose perspective on the difference between internet time and real world time, because we're still living in the real world.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, and you just brought it up, is how you went to TV advertising. You did it really early in the business, right? And obviously you have to have a clear value proposition. There has to be a way to monetize it. But I remember you were filming this spot that you wanted to test online. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, you tested it on TV, and then your ads were everywhere. And it's like, you can't even turn on a sporting event without seeing ZipRecruiter every single time, which is incredible. Can you talk about like that early, like, how did you think about first testing TV? I think a lot of people don't realize that it's very cost effective these days just to get like your first buy-in. And how did you measure it early on to know that it was working for you and that you should keep investing there?
Well, there's many questions in that question. Let's start from the end and work our way backwards. So what I again preach internally at ZipRecruiter is, if something works, it works right away, and you should be able to look at a chart and see the day it launched. Like if you can't look at a chart and tell me the day it launched, no matter what your A/B test tells you the outcome was, I don't believe you. Like I should be able to feel it and see it. So TV is just one of those things where when we launched it, you could look at a chart and be like, that's the day TV went live. It was an immediate effect, and then it builds over time. There's like a halo effect to TV. It actually lifts all your other marketing channels, and marketing's a topic we could get really deep into. I'm going to try to avoid that, but I'll just say philosophically, for those that are contemplating going to a multi-channel marketing strategy, which means like you're going to go not just on buying keywords on sites like Google, but you're going to do social, and you're going to do radio, and you're going to do television. This is the truth, okay? And it was true for me too, which is there is a lot of best practice, conventional wisdom. This is how the pros do it. This is how you're going to get the quality you want. This is how you're going to get the results you want. It's all this advice that comes from companies that are bigger than you and have been doing it longer than you. And if you follow all that advice, you're going to pay a huge premium for the marketing that you do, that you do not have to pay. If you do it the exact same way your competitors are doing it, you're always going to be second best. The first commercial that we shot at ZipRecruiter, when we went and we did the RFP to different production companies, was quoted at $500,000. That's how much they said it would cost. We shot it for $30,000. We wrote the script, we did the graphics, we hired the best looking actors in LA that we could find. And then we put something out there, and it took us 2 years of working with professional production companies when we started to do it the way everyone said was the best practice way to do it, to create a commercial that could beat it. 2 years. So you don't have to be a genius at this stuff. You don't have to go spend a ton of money to do this stuff. What you have to do is know your product. You have to know what is the pain point that you address, what is the problem you solve, what is the service you deliver. That one sentence that a customer would tell a prospect, that needs to be the thrust of your entire commercial. That's how you need to talk about yourself. So I think everyone underestimates the value of marketing because they just feel like it's this mysterious, confusing world. And honestly, in all the jobs I'd had prior to Zip, I hadn't done a ton of marketing. So this was all stuff that in that 95% of stuff I wasn't good at that I had to learn and get comfortable with. And I think everyone can do it. And I would strongly encourage entrepreneurs who have that 1 million threshold met to seriously consider advertising.
Looking from the outside, so many of us, you just think like, hey, ZipRecruiter has been this unmitigated success. This is the kind of path, we'd like to have. And it has been. It never feels that way on the inside. As you look back over these years since you started the company, and and maybe we'll separate out, any like struggle with time or work-life balance. Like, what's been the hardest part for you? What was the biggest challenge in the ZipRecruiter journey professionally for you? And what could you share with other folks that may be lucky enough to be in your position of like, hey, when you're in it, even though from the outside it looks like it's a perfect straight line up, this is what the struggle is. This is what's hard. This is the mental toll that, you're going to live through.
Well, I mean, I think there are many different struggles when you're running a business, but the one you'll feel immediately and the one that will be the most pointed if you were like me, because I was later in my career, I was a sought after executive in LA. I was something of a turnaround guy. I had a bit of a reputation, and the job I had before ZipRecruiter, I tell people like my salary started with a 3 in the job I had before ZipRecruiter, and when I went to ZipRecruiter, my salary still started with a 3, but I went from getting paid in the high 300,000s down to getting paid 30,000. And so I had 2 kids at this point, a mortgage, a lot of expenses, and I started burning cash really fast. And even though it was working, I was trying to take as little out of the business as I could so that we could reinvest in the growth of the business. And I'll just never forget, I was literally working at my kitchen table because we didn't even have an office. And I looked up at my wife, who was at the kitchen counter, and I said to her, I know we may have to sell this house, and I know the kids may not be able to go to private school, but I just want to say thank you, because this is my bliss. I finally feel like I'm working on a problem that I really believe in. I'm applying all my skills. This is the best version of me I can be, and thank you for supporting me. And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, how long? And I said, what? And she said, how long before we call this a failure? And I was like, scrambling. Give me 2 years. Give me 2 years, because that's how much runway we have. And after 2 years, we'll be flat broke and I'll go get a job again. And she agreed. And then the rest, fortunately, is very good news history, because it took way less than 2 years for us to get income that was very close to where we were at prior to that, and able to like sort of resume our lifestyle. But man, like I had everything perfect. I had the credentials, the experience, I had a healthy nest egg in place. I had an idea that had immediate traction, and I still felt incredible, intense pressure financially. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs go through that, and it is psychologically really difficult, because for a lot of people, most entrepreneurs are between the ages of 30 and 45. And for many of those people, there are a lot of career opportunities in front of them that are lucrative and bring a lot of stability. And so it's just this trade-off that you're going to have to make. So be ready. It is definitely intense the first couple of years.
All right. So if you could take a time machine back into your 20s and you could give that Ian any advice, what would it be and why?
I mean, I think like life, there's this truth about most entrepreneurs I talk to, which is they undercharge for their product. They're afraid to ask for full value. They don't think about pricing as a lever or an opportunity. They don't really understand their customers' price insensitivity. And that's just confidence. That's literally like, it's an insecurity that they have about whether what they built is good enough. They don't have perspective. And I feel like in my 20s, I became a VP and was not managing a team, but managing teams when I was 23. And then I think the first time I had 100 people reporting to me, I was 25. And every company I went to was incredibly successful. And I was making a good amount of money when I was young, and I still didn't have the confidence to go out on my own and build my own startup. It literally took me twice being the turnaround guy to businesses before I'm like, wait a minute. Why do I keep taking like 1% of these businesses so that somebody else can do incredibly well? Like it's no fun to fix a broken business. So I think I would say to myself, believe in yourself. Like trust your gut. There's a certain amount of experience that I'm going to call enough. Okay. So like if you've been working for, call it 7 to 10 years, I think you're ready to be an entrepreneur. You just need the courage, not the conviction, the courage to throw yourself out there. And I think I could have been an entrepreneur much sooner than I was.
The same thing for your 30s. If you could go back into your 30s or we even say 40s and give yourself any personal or professional advice, what would it be and why?
What would I tell myself in my 30s that was different? I think, so I had my first kid when I turned 30, and I tell my kids all the time, you never met me. You have no idea who I was before, because I changed everything about myself for you. And I guess, I think what I would tell myself in my 30s is enjoy this decade more. Like before, I think I sacrificed more than I had to, faster than I had to. And then, like it was like all about the business. And then at home, it was all about the kids. And one thing that really matters is your relationships, whether it be with your spouse or your parents or your extended family. And I think I like sacrificed some of the investment that I could have made there, the opportunities for, travel, the opportunities for meaningful experiences. Because it is, when something takes off or when you're working at a startup, it's all consuming. And going back to that notion of perspective, like I'm the happiest now that I've ever been. And I work 20 hours a week less than I did probably 5 years ago, but I don't think I'm less effective. I'm just more selective about where I put my time and attention. So,
Yeah. I'd love to dive in there for a moment. I always felt like you were way ahead of the curve. Like I remember when I had started a company, my mid-20s, it was a badge of honor of how hard you could work. And like our team had the sense of pride that we'd be at the office every night until 9 or 10, and we'd be there late on Fridays, and we worked weekends when we needed to. And then I remember seeing how you built up the business. And like if you talk to folks at ZipRecruiter, among the many things they love is they all talk about like the amazing work-life balance. Like it's all over your Comparably reviews and page, like incredible work-life balance. And obviously, as work has become more remote and COVID's come in, every organization has had to get better at that and provide more flexibility. How have you thought about like building in that work-life balance from the very beginning? You talked about it, but B, like, what are the things you actually have to do to be successful? Because as you said, it becomes extra important that you work on the right things.
yeah.
Because if you're not, then you're probably just falling behind other folks that are out competing you and outworking you.
Well, I think a lot of business success is not about what you choose to do, it's about what you choose not to do. And as I said before, when your business is growing, everything's a good idea. And there's a real temptation to overstretch how much you can get done. And when I say get done, I mean get done well, like top quality, first rate execution. And so, the notion of white space and simplification exists in many facets of business. The hardest place to apply it to is product prioritization. Picking the things that you will do strategically and limiting it to a short enough list that you can absolutely crush that list. And we have made it a complete discipline at ZipRecruiter. I mean, the only way you can have real work-life balance is if everyone is 100% aligned on what matters, and anything that doesn't fit that short list of what we said we're going to get done this quarter is excluded. You do not allow extra work to pile on, because that's what erodes work-life balance. So we have very clear understanding of who we are at the company, what we are trying to accomplish. And every quarter we put out the short list. And this is the list of things we are going to do without question. There's metrics around each of the things that we say we're going to do. So we're holding ourselves accountable. And every other great idea that comes up, because every quarter a great idea comes up, we just don't touch it. We literally have the discipline. We have the will, is how I would say it. Do you have the will to say no? It's like going on a diet. It's like, do you have the will to deny yourself the gratification so that you can get the goal that you already set done before you go on to the next goal? And that, to me, has been the key to work-life balance success. It's not about telling people you don't have to work hard, because we work hard. We're just really focused about the time that we spend. And COVID's been a revelation. I mean, the amazing thing about doing all these video meetings during COVID is everybody comes prepared. Everybody comes with an agenda. Everybody wants to make the most of the time they have, because they know that there's just not this overflow time where you can just keep talking to people, that everybody's scheduled and regimented. And I think in many ways, if there was a silver lining to COVID, it made ZipRecruiter a much better business than we were, not just sort of from an operational cost perspective, because we learned just how efficient we could be, but in a communication, from the framework of a communication paradigm. I mean, as a company, people got very, very good at explaining themselves in writing in a way that was speaking to an audience at any level. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is very hard to explain what you're doing and why it's important in a way that everyone would find interesting and be able to understand. And that has become truly a defining characteristic of our internal culture at this point.
How do you feel like your team would describe your leadership style?
Let me say, this is how I hope they would describe it. Let's do it like that. And I spend a lot of time talking about culture when I'm on stages at ZipRecruiter, and I'm talking particularly to new hires. And I say, like, look, we have a ton of perks here, and you'll see the artificial grass turf in the kitchen and the beautiful furniture we buy, and we'll have parties and we'll have happy hours, and you'll see we have a ton of like financial perks for you. We're a great place to work, and none of that matters. Like, when it comes to culture, only one thing matters, and that it's you feel safe saying anything to anyone. That's what it's got to be. Like, if you want a real culture of safety, then you need to invest in letting people operate like entrepreneurs. Like never assume that anything is unchangeable. Like, if you work on a tool and you think that tool is taking 2 steps and it should take 1 step, tell someone. If you have an idea that will improve our business, share it. So I really believe there's only 2 types of managers. There's managers you work for, and there's managers you work with. I'm more of a guy you work with. I will walk the floor. I will sit down and talk to you about what you're working on. I'm keenly interested. I've done every job in the company, because when we bootstrapped, we didn't have any employees. So like, I've been a sales rep, I've been customer support, I've done BD, I've done marketing. Like, I've really, like, I know your job. So I'm unusual. I'm like a Renaissance man CEO. Like, I'm interested, and I want to learn from you, because I've always hired people who are smarter than me to do the jobs that needed to get done. So you can work with me, you can talk to me, you can say anything you want to me, and I will welcome that.
Who's the person that has worked for you that you learned the most from, and like, what are some examples of those lessons?
Oh my God, I've learned from so many people. I mean, like, one of the things you will discover if you run a business long enough is everybody who leaves takes credit. They all say, like, oh, they couldn't have done it without me. They couldn't have done it without me. And you know what I say every time I hear one of those stories? It's true. It's 100% true. Like, you made an incredible contribution while you were here. I wasn't smart enough to do what you did. I didn't have enough time to operate every department. And thank you. Thank you so much for doing what you did. Tell everyone that we couldn't have done it without you. I will support your story. But I've learned so much from so many people, and like the nature of an ever-growing company. Like, the real truth about hiring at a growing business is what you do is you increasingly specialize roles. That's what you do. And you get to a point where like what you're doing is hiring experts at smaller and smaller things. And I'll tell you one story. We had a guy come in. He was from a marketing agency. This is when we were already doing a lot of marketing, and I thought we knew a lot about marketing. And I was like, who is this guy? I talked to him in the interview. They had me interview him. I didn't understand a word he said. I was like, he spoke marketingese, like, industry stuff to me. He didn't talk my language. If you guys want to hire him, I'm not going to overrule you, but like, listen, man, I have no idea what this guy does. The first day he was on the job, he came into my office and he said, hey, Ian, where are the audit logs for the radio ads? I was like, what's an audit log? He's like, the thing they give you that tells you whether or not they actually ran the ad you paid for? Like, they prove to you that they ran the ad. I was like, they do that? And then he went and checked, and he saved us $1 million his first day. His first day, he saved us $1 million. And I was like, I'm an idiot. There's so much I don't know that I don't know. And every time I feel like the slightest bit of hubris, the slightest bit of pride in like what I know, I learn I don't know anything again. So I have so many examples of stories like that, but I have learned from people at every level in the organization, and I continue to learn. And that's like, I only have one New Year's resolution, by the way. Every year I make the same New Year's resolution. It's only one. It's listen better.
All right. On that note, I want to listen about your new book, Get Hired Now. You and I have talked about it. I don't know probably anybody better than you to give advice to people on how to get the job that they're looking for, how to find the job of their dreams. Obviously, it's what you stand for as a business. What are the key principles? Like, if you had half an hour to sit down with somebody and coach them in their career, and you're like, look, if you do these things, you will get hired now. What are those principles from your book?
Well, first, and foremost, I want to say that I have personally talked to literally thousands of job seekers. I have collected their stories. I've heard about their process, their frustration. And it's funny because the things they say are always the same. They're always saying, they always have the same complaints. And I realized after not just looking at the troves of data we have at ZipRecruiter, but also I'm a student of sort of the general world of research around job search. So like an extraordinary amount of external research has been done. And if there are let's just stick to two main themes. These are the two main themes that that disadvantage people in their job search. Number one, there has been a fundamental change in what happens to your application after you submit it, because applications no longer go to humans. They do not get put in somebody's inbox for a human to review. The first step is they go to a robot, piece of software that reviews that application to try and sort you against all the other applicants, because there's too many applicants, decide who the best applicants are. Literally the only job of your resume is to get past the robots. That's it. That's the only thing. There's nothing else that resume is going to do for you, okay? All of the conventional wisdom that they have been giving you for the last 20 years about resumes is now bunk. You need to stop writing resumes that way. You need to stop trying to be a snowflake where your resume stands out in a pile of resumes that somebody is sifting through because of the beauty of its design, because of the elegance of its prose, because you did some non-traditional thing inside your resume to stand out, like printed it on vellum instead of on paper, like all that stuff, useless, absolutely useless. It's bits and bytes. You're trying to get past a robot. You want to use the simplest resume template you can. You want to write like a caveman. You want to describe your skills and contributions in the most straightforward way possible, using the most common vernacular possible. And you want to put numbers around it so that you state your achievements entirely through impact. It's like, look, man, I hired 20 people. I put the process in place by which we hired those people. Stuff like that, solid gold. So number one, write your resume the right way. I tell you.
Can I ask, is there a company size where that most applies? Is that like a business with 500 employees or more? Or do you feel like even at mid-size and smaller companies, that's still the paradigm?
Well, 75% of resumes are now read by a robot before they're read by a human. And the first robot is on job sites. So when a small business goes to a job site and posts a job, even those job sites, when you apply, are trying to parse the resumes that are submitted by candidates and create shortlists. For larger companies, it happens inside something called an applicant tracking software, but it's happening basically everywhere and increasingly because the new matching tech is so good. Employers are learning to trust the output of the robot. So if it says you're a top 20 candidate, those are the only 20 resumes they're going to look at. They're going to skip the rest. You got to get past that robot. The second thing is bias. Oh my goodness, people. You have no idea how strong bias is. Unconscious bias is crazy, crazy prevalent and strong, and you have it too. So don't feel like these employers are picking on you because you possess the same bias they do. But once you understand that, you understand that the key to getting hired, particularly when you actually get into an interview, is winning those first 20 seconds. I know that sounds like I'm like condensing it down into something that sounds too simple, but so much of getting a job is the first 20 seconds of your interview. I walk you through exactly how to crush the first 20 seconds of your interview and what to say and what to do in those 20 seconds so that they like you. That's really it, man. Once they develop that initial impression, everything else they do is an exercise in validation of their initial impression. So you need to win the battle of the first 20 seconds. If you're doing a video interview, you get 1 second. 1 second. But guess what? That's even easier because you get to set the frame. You have 100% control of that first second. So if you want to know how to do it, buy the book. It's very prescriptive. It's very specific. It will tell you exactly what to do.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I feel like everyone who's a hiring manager within that first minute or two formulates either consciously or unconsciously a desire to want to lean into that candidate, or there's some skepticism and like, oh, this is going to be an interview I'm not looking forward to. One of the things I try to advise every single person I ever meet to is just ask one question first and foremost in every job interview. And I feel like it will make somebody $1 million more in their career. And it just, what are you most looking for this candidate and for this role? Because everyone in their mind, every hiring manager has a list of what they want, and it's detailed, like it's specific words. And I think the mistake that so many people make in hiring is the same fundamental mistake of sales, is that you talk about a bunch of things that aren't relevant and meaningful to somebody. And I feel like if every candidate just started their interview asking that question to the hiring manager, they'd be so dramatically advantaged over other people interviewing live as well.
Well, listen, man, I fully agree that the secret to a great interview is a dialogue. Think of it like a tennis match. You're not bowling. They're not setting up pins for you to knock them down. The biggest trap question you're ever going to get in an interview is, tell me about yourself. If you start a monologue, you're dead. Don't ever answer that question. That question is the hard no rule. Don't answer that question. I love what you just said, which is ask them a question. In the book, I actually talk about a magic sentence. I give you a magic sentence that you can say in every interview to start the interview to guarantee it gets off on the right foot, because that's the part people don't know. They don't know what to do when they sit down. The magic sentence is really, really simple. Ready? Here's all you got to say. I'm so excited to be here because fill in the blank, something specific. I'm so excited to be here because I read your reviews on Comparably and your culture is awesome. How did you create that culture? I'm so excited to be here because I read about your leadership team. That is a murderer's row of talent. How did you get so many talented people together? I'm so excited to be here because I use your product every day and I have so many ideas for how we can work on that product. And I would just love to hear how you built that product. Anytime you get them talking about themselves, you're winning. When people talk about themselves, it triggers the same part of your brain that eating chocolate or having sex does. It is like literally a drug. They will love you for letting them talk about themselves to you, and they will feel like they had a great interview with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing the magic sentence. It's fantastic advice. I always want to know from other CEOs, what are the screening questions you ask? And I still find job interviews so awkward and archaic. Like after 20 years, I don't know how to sit across a conference table from somebody, 1 or 2 times for an hour each, and know if we should be working together for the next 5 years of our life, 50 hours a week. And so I always, what are 3 or 4 questions you feel like you consistently ask in the job interview process that helps you identify who might really be a good fit?
Well, I am now at a point in my career where I'm interviewing more senior people. So these are questions that I ask, but feel free to steal them. And also, like, I probably asked different questions earlier in my career, but the number one thing I look for in talent is, do they only think about their role and how to be good at that, or do they think about the business? And the best question I found for discovering what type of thinker they are is, whatever company they're at right now, just ask them, okay, tell me about the competitive landscape for the business you work for right now and how your current company is different. Because by asking that question, it shows, like, if they can't answer that question, like if they're a senior person and they can't answer that question, then really all they've ever focused on is optimization. Like, I've got a role, somebody told me how to be successful here, I'm just going to do that same thing over and over again. They're not thinking about the health and success of the overall business. And I'm someone who wants to work with you. I don't want you to work for me. So I want you to be a thought partner to me. I want you to think about the business in its entirety. Another thing I will often ask is, okay, I'm sure you did research on ZipRecruiter. What's the worst thing about our business? What's the first thing that if you got here, you would tell me we should do or change? I love that question because it's the introduction to our culture of safety, where it's, if you run, first of all, are you afraid to answer that question or not? Because if you're afraid, you're not going to do well here. And I don't want to hear compliments in that moment. I actually want to hear input. And I think it is a great way to have a dialogue with somebody, because it's what they think of as your pain point. It's that same thing about like having a current customer talk to a prospect. When somebody does research on you from like a third-party perspective, what's the word on your business, is such an interesting question as opposed to what you think the word on your business is. So those are 2 of my go-tos. I have a whole laundry list of them, but those are 2.
I love it. I hadn't really heard either of those, and I'm going to steal both of them.
Awesome.
So you'll get a royalty check from me in 10 years for every successful hire we got from them. one of the things that it's really fascinating to me too is like, how do you feel like you are different as a leader today than when you first started the company? Because again, you had a lot of experience. It wasn't as if, you know, you started this company as a 22-year-old and then now you're in your mid 30s. You had already had all this leadership experience, but how would you classify yourself today as a leader versus maybe even a year into ZipRecruiter? And like, what were the big things that changed you and evolved you along the way?
I think the biggest thing that happens, and I've talked to so many other CEOs about this, and it's tied back to that theme of confidence. But you know, in my mind, there's a big difference between management and leadership. Management is something a lot of people can do. That's being a metrics-driven culture where you let the data dictate your path and you sort of follow where the data takes you or what the customer feedback does. Leadership is harder. Leadership is making big decisions with imperfect data because you either think it's the right thing or you have conviction that that's the right thing for your product. And so leadership examples, you know, we all had to go through it over the last year, which was a very tough year. So it was things like COVID, a contested election, Black Lives Matter. I mean, this was not the year where you wanted to launch a business and be a first-time CEO, because there were a lot of really tough, challenging moments in there. And so for me, you know, leadership commanded that you not just speak to the merits of the business, but that you speak to what was happening to society as a whole. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just about sharing your truth and just being authentic and available. And so like I think I did more than 30 conversations one-on-one with employees, just so they had somebody to talk to about how they were feeling and to help them process it. It's not in my job description, but I feel like it helped stabilize the business. When COVID hit, the job market was decimated. It was literally, we went from 4% unemployment to, you know, mid-teens in about 30 days. And there's so many layoffs happening, and our business took a real hit from that. And we actually had to do a layoff ourselves. And I personally did every single one of the layoffs. I didn't ask a single manager to do a single layoff. I did all of them myself because I felt like each of these people, not through a failure of performance, but through a situation that was outside their control, was going to have to be let go. And I just wanted them to hear it from me. And every one of those conversations sucked, but that's like a moment where I thought that's how I can help them and take accountability in this moment. Leadership, just to give you one more example, is I talk about to our executive team all the time that the more senior you get in an organization, the less perfect the data you have from which to make decisions. So you have to, like, to some degree, do alchemy, not science. It's about intuition. And we've had to make really hard choices along the way about, like, even what revenue we would and would not take. And a great example is there was this gold mine of money to make for a long time in online for-profit education. And we literally were looking at opportunities that were in the tens of millions if we were willing to promote for-profit online education to the job seekers on ZipRecruiter. And we refused to do it. We never did it. And there were so many people that were upset about it. Every one of our competitors was doing it. Like, why wouldn't we? And I was just like, it's wrong. It's wrong. The matriculation rates are under 10%. It's debt you can't declare bankruptcy out of. It's predominantly targeting minorities who didn't finish high school. Like, everything about it was wrong. And so we didn't do it. And that was a really tough decision. And interestingly, it's one of those things that was easier because we weren't in a VC-backed business that was just saying more faster. So, but to me, those are the moments where you really shine. Leaders are not people who review every decision everyone makes and then, like, checks off yes. I try to make as few decisions as possible in our business day. I try to only make the really big decisions.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so I got one more question on that theme, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the future before we wrap up. And I think you already hit on maybe the first, but I think one of the things, like, you're just a pretty amazing coach and mentor, right? And so if you were to think about the big advice that you would give to your senior leadership team, maybe to middle managers, and then someone earlier on in their career, like, what's the big advice that you give to folks inside your own company that are in each of those three stages?
Oh, I give everyone the same advice. This is the most common piece of advice I give. Generously give the benefit of the doubt. It is like a superpower. When you start to feel upset, give the benefit of the doubt. Almost never is there true malice between two individuals inside of a business. Almost never is there real malice between a partner and your business. Like, there is a side, this is why I say listen better. And particularly for my senior people, I talk about the evolution I expect you to go through in your career. And the more senior you get, the two truths of being senior are: you lose the right to get upset because you set the tone for the room. Everyone's going to model off of you. As long as you're calm, the conversation is calm. And number two, you have to tell the truth. And that sounds so simple. That sounds so straightforward. You have to tell the truth. Of course, don't we all tell the truth? Aren't we always telling the truth? No, we are not. I want you to know that, like, I have found very few truth speakers. Telling the truth means that in the moment, right after something happens, you're giving constructive feedback. That is very difficult. It feels confrontational. Telling the truth is explaining to someone what level they're really at and how far they are away from the next goal. Telling the truth is looking at an idea not just based on like how cool it looks or how it makes you feel or what your gut tells you, but like finding data to support the merit of your argument that this is something should be a priority. So it's really difficult to actually tell the truth consistently, and it takes courage. And tell the truth, stay calm. Those are the things I expect as you move up in our organization.
That's fantastic. Is there an area, like when you say listen better, do you see a most common mistake? Do you see an area that you wish your own team and other people would focus on listening better?
Oh yeah, I mean, the thing that we are all not cognizant enough of is that the only thing in business that takes real courage is version 1. And version 1 is a delicate, fragile thing. And you want to create a culture where people are generating a high volume of version 1s, because only after version 1 can anything get any good at all. But it's so easy to crush, especially when there's a power imbalance. And so, like, I personally, when people give me an idea, I literally practice waiting 2 seconds before I respond. I literally sit there and think, don't respond, process it, hear it. And then my first goal is to try and figure out a way to yes and what they've said and not tell them why it won't work. I have so much more experience than the people who work for me. Most of the time, I can tell them why their idea is not going to work the second they give it to me. And what I'm doing is I'm stifling them. I'm making them believe that they're never going to give me an idea that's good enough that I'm going to be excited about it. And so I talk about, let's have a reverence for and a respect for version 1s. Let's support everyone who's creating version 1s, and let's listen and just yes and version 1s, because version 1s are what's going to get us to version 10s. And that's what's going to make step functions in our business.
You just gave me some good coaching and some homework that I got to focus on with my own team. I know that I'm guilty of that as well, of not waiting the 2 seconds and not doing enough yes ands. Let's talk about the future. I want to know what your crystal ball, which is better than, pretty much anyone's out there, like the future of work. Like, as you think of 5 years out from today, what's going to be the biggest difference in how people get hired and what their work lives are like? What's either the data telling you that you're seeing of trends, or what's your own intuition and gut telling you of how the future of work is going to be different than it has been?
Wow. We all got to participate in a grand social experiment over the last 12 months together, didn't we? Where we all went and worked remote. And prior to that last 12 months, I mean, truly working remote was like a niche activity that happened in a small, less than 1% fraction of companies. And now it's across America in every industry at every seniority level. Every business is figuring out how to allow remote work. 60 to 80% of businesses polled, not just in ZipRecruiter polls, but in multiple external polls, say that remote work is here to stay. 80% of employees want remote work to stay. They prefer it. They don't want to necessarily never go to headquarters, but they don't want to be required to go to headquarters every day. And this is a fundamental change to the world of work, because suddenly It's not just your geographic proximity to a physical location that dictates where you can work, but you can work anywhere in the country, potentially even out of the country. And more importantly, for employers, the number one complaint for employers since I started ZipRecruiter is insufficient quality candidates in market. That is their number one complaint. Let me tell you what happens when you open up a job search to our advanced matching algorithms nationwide instead of limiting it to a 50-mile radius. You don't get an order of magnitude more candidates, you get orders of magnitude more candidates. It's like if you thought before that you were going to get 100, imagine getting 10,000 candidates to choose from. So what it really does to the liquidity of a marketplace is it means that there's always theoretically talent available. And that means that you as an employer are confident that you can fill every job that you're posting. It potentially also has effects on bottom lines because now you don't need a headquarters that has a desk for every employee. Now you don't need to have a salary scale that is the same for every state. You could potentially pay somebody in one state less than you pay them in another because in that state, that's a very lucrative salary. So you could bring your overall cost down while making recruiting easier. We're already seeing multiple companies that have jumped on this trend. A lot of them are in Silicon Valley. They were the first, they were the pioneers. They've already said, we're going to go remote forever. They're big, famous companies. It's the Squares and the Twitters and the Facebooks of the world. But what Silicon Valley does in work tends to be the tip of the spear, and we tend to see it spread across the rest of the country. So I would not be surprised if remote work is here to stay. That said, we'll see. We're about to find out. It's a very exciting time in the world of work.
Yeah. I've been in the unique position of probably being one of the first people ever to get to see V1 of ZipRecruiter, and still all these years later, a customer, and it's an amazing platform. I always like to ask founder CEOs that are certainly product focused, like, you and me, what's your favorite part of ZipRecruiter that maybe not as many people know about? Like, what's that thing that you just love about your product that is not necessarily more hidden, but that people might not know about right away?
Well, let's just say that the entire way the job market works makes no sense. Employers who are relatively poor at describing who they will hire write a description that they then post, and 85% of the candidates who find that job and apply are unqualified for the job. So there's just a ton of thrash both ways. We've built these advanced matching algorithms that are very good at finding the very best active candidates in market for a job that was just posted and inducing those candidates to apply within seconds of that job going online. But that was us notifying those job seekers. Last year, we did an experiment where instead of us sending a message to those candidates, we took the list of candidates the algorithm would notify, and we just put them in front of the employer with a little simple summary of who each of these people were. And we said to the employer, you can invite any of these candidates you like to come apply to this job. This was a transformation to our business. Like, this is one of those very small changes that has incredible leverage because it 100% flipped how the hiring market worked. So instead of job seekers going first and applying to jobs, employers go first and they recruit the candidates. And what I say is, job seekers hate applying to jobs, but they love getting recruited. Literally everyone takes the recruiter call. It's a story they tell to their family and friends. You know who called me today? You know who wants me? This company. I mean, it's literally the way it just should work. Since we launched that feature, we have over 1.5 million invitations from employers going out per month to candidates to apply to their job. It has the highest apply-through rate of any solution we've ever launched on our service. And when those candidates do apply and the employers see the full resume, more than 65% of them are getting a thumbs up, which is like off the charts as a success metric. So I think we've seen the future of recruiting. I think it's right there in front of us, and we're just going to keep innovating against that.
One or two more questions before we wrap up. You've got this incredible company culture. You talk about data. Here's the data from your own employees, right? So fantastic scores from women, from people of color on your team. Like, it's clearly an organization where folks love working at. To me, I'm really trying to figure out, for Comparably and for other companies I'm involved with, how do we build at this time where everything is remote a great company culture? Like, we're trying to figure out, okay, well, do we do more all hands meetings? We're implementing now like every other week kind of a game night where we get together and let team members meet each other and spend more time together who are off teams, trying to facilitate different one-on-one conversations. What have you been doing at ZipRecruiter to try to foster as positive a company culture when people aren't together physically in that same environment?
Well, first and foremost, as soon as we went remote, we started a weekly all hands, which as the CEO, I mean, it's a burden. Let's just be honest, like coming up with something interesting and fun to say every week. And ironically, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. And then I realized, because we number them. So I think we're on number 44 right now. So I've done 44 weekly all hands. It isn't about the content. That's what I had to understand. Like, it's about connection, and it's how I am feeling comes through very clearly. And I can be talking about anything. And we have expanded it. We just sometimes show a bunch of testimonials from customers. We sometimes do deep dives on the business metrics. We sometimes do interviews with various employees just so everyone gets to know more of the employees at the company. It's about having authentic conversations and not scripted, stilted, structured conversations. And it's been really, that I think has been a huge, important piece of maintaining our culture. We also put a bunch of rules in place for how we were going to have meetings. So cameras have to be on. That way people are present, seeing each other's faces. Even if that means I can see your kids or your pets, I don't care. I love it. We're all people. We all have kids, and many of us have kids and pets. So no problem there. And then finally, and this is the part that I always have to remind myself of, random acts of appreciation. I just can't stress how far that goes. So sometimes we send people candy bars. Sometimes we send them liquor. It doesn't have to be incredibly expensive. It just has to be personal and specific. So that's how we're doing it. Onboarding is tough. Taking someone who's never been part of your culture and integrating them, that's the real challenge right now. If you guys figure out a perfect solution for them to come back on, I'm just going to listen. You guys tell me.
Well, we do a weekly all hands, and it's probably my favorite meeting of the week. And like you, I think we've had a lot of success in just making it more about the team, sharing stories and talking and building connection. Last question, and I could spend a whole lot more time here with you. What's your future hold when you think of the next 10, 20 years? Like, what are you most excited about to get to do professionally? Like, you've already had so much success. ZipRecruiter is going to continue to grow as this incredible brand and platform for job seekers and for companies. I think, again, so many people would, say, hey, that's the person I want to get to be. That's the situation I want to be in. So what excites you most for your future?
Well, I want to be very clear. ZipRecruiter is better than the way it used to work, but it's not good enough. And for me, I want to build a product that my kids use to find jobs when they enter the workforce, and that makes it easy and delightful for them to find work, and makes it easy for employers to hire them, because there's still just way too much unnecessary thrash in this whole process. And I believe we can do it. I believe we're really close. I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to be an absolute transformation in how everybody views the job market, and that ZipRecruiter is going to be one of the key ingredients to bringing about that new reality, because we're just so focused, we're so methodical, we're so disciplined on building a better solution for both sides of the marketplace. So I know I'm excited about it. It's a challenge that gets me charged up every day. And I tell people, like, look, we're already successful. If you just measure it in dollars, like, we're doing amazing. And you'd say, like, we're a big success. And my favorite business quote is from Mark Cuban, who said, "The problem with achieving your goals is the person you had to become to achieve those goals has different goals." And there is no greater expression of truth about my own journey, where, I used to be like, I wish we could hit this revenue threshold. I wish we could have this many customers. I don't think about any of that anymore. I mean, I have to look at it and monitor it. What I think about now is, how can we delight people? How can we give people an experience so good that ZipRecruiter becomes a verb? Those are the kind of goals that I have in my head now. And that's what, keeps me coming to work every day.
It's amazing. Well, I've been fortunate to call you friend for many years, and I got to tell you, man, I think you know this already, but you're at the top of the list of folks that I've learned from. And sometimes it's come with probably a healthy degree of envy because you just make everything look so easy. Like watching this journey that you and your co-founders went on and how you built this business the right way and found product market fit and grew it. I know that there's so many of us that point to ZipRecruiter as an example of like, that's the kind of company that we want to build. That's the success we want to have. That's the impact we want to leave on people. And to touch the amount of lives that you do and to help them, as your book in the background there says, get hired now is a pretty meaningful life's mission. And so there's a lot of us that are continuing to root you and your team on for lots of success and to see where you all go. Thank you so much for your time today. I know this was an incredible hour plus spent with so many folks and helping them on their journeys as well.
Thank you for those kind words, Jason.
And thank all of you for continuing to come in and listen to our leadership series here. We're going to continue to have more amazing guests like Ian coming up. So keep joining us, keep spreading the word, and looking forward to seeing you for more upcoming sessions. Stay safe, stay sane, and have lots of success in your own professional endeavors. And we'll see you for the next show here soon. Thanks, everybody.